In 1795, on the heath at Newmarket, a man named Harry Ogden did something nobody had tried. Instead of betting on one horse, he wrote every horse into a little book and offered odds on all of them at once. The numbers were arranged so that whichever horse won, the book still came out ahead. He was not gambling. He was running a machine, and every gambler on the heath was feeding it. This is the origin of the bookmaker, the man who sold you the bet he could not lose. So, how did one man with a chalkboard and a notebook become the ancestor of an industry that now takes in hundreds of billions of dollars a year, and for a while ran through the very heart of organized crime? The bookmaker is one of the few professions whose entire genius is hidden in plain sight, printed on the board for everyone to see and understood by almost no one. Picture him at the racecourse, chalk in hand, calling out numbers that seem to reward you, smiling as you hand over your money. We think of him as a gambler, a man taking a risk against us. He is nothing of the kind. To understand why, and to understand how that cheerful figure at the track became a fixture of the criminal underworld long before he was ever made legal, you have to follow him from a muddy English heath, through a back alley century of crime, all the way to the app in your pocket. Start with the phrase itself, because it explains the whole trade. A bookmaker makes a book. In the beginning, that was meant literally. He kept a book, a ledger, and into it he wrote every bet laid on every runner in the race. Before Harry Ogden, betting was a scattered, personal thing. Two gentlemen would wager against each other on a single horse, eye to eye, winner take all. That is gambling, and in gambling either side can lose. What Ogden understood, standing on the heath at Newmarket in the 1790s, was that if you took the other side of every bet, from everyone, on every horse, and set your numbers carefully, you did not have to guess the winner at all. You only had to balance the book. The story of Harry Ogden is, it should be said, part history and part legend. The records of the 1790s are thin, and he stands in for a whole generation of men who worked out the same trick at roughly the same time on the English turf. But the principle attached to his name is exactly right, and it is the principle that matters, not the man. Betting, before these men, was a duel. After them, it was a business. The gambler still played a game of chance. The bookmaker had quietly stepped out of the game and begun charging admission to it. Here is the detail everyone forgets when they watch the odds flicker on a screen. The odds a bookmaker offers are not a true picture of each horse's chances. They are shaded, every single one of them, so that if you add up what all the odds quietly imply, the total comes to more than 100%. That extra slice, the amount over 100, is called the overround, and it is the bookmaker's margin baked into the board before the race is even run. Balance enough money across the field at those shaded prices, and it does not matter which horse crosses the line first. The book has already won. Ogden did not invent luck. He invented a way to sell luck while quietly keeping the house. You can hear that same trick hidden inside the very language of the trade. When a bookmaker offers a horse at even money, or at odds against, or calls a heavy favorite odds on, he is not describing the world. He is quoting a price, and every price carries his cut. The words feel like pure information, 3-1, 5-2, evens, and they are meant to. But translate any full set of a race's odds back into plain percentages and add them up, and you will always find that same figure sitting just over 100, the house's margin, wearing the costume of mathematics. The quiet genius of the bookmaker was to make his fee look like a fact about horses. For most of the 19th century, this was a trade of chalk and shouting. Bookmakers stood in the betting ring at the racecourse, each with a board and a stick of chalk, wiping and rewriting the odds as the money moved. To pass prices across a roaring crowd, a strange sign language grew up, worked by the men they called tic-tac men, who signaled the shifting odds with sweeping gestures of white-gloved hands, touching cap and elbow and nose in a code only the initiated could read. It looked like theater, and in a sense it was, but underneath the spectacle the ledger was always ticking, always balancing. The chalk was the show. The book was the business. There was, it turned out, another way to run betting entirely, and it is worth knowing because it shows the choice being made. In the 1860s, a Frenchman named Joseph Aller, the same man who would later build the Moulin Rouge, invented a system called the pari mutuel, in which every bet goes into a single shared pool. The house rakes a fixed cut off the top, and whatever remains is simply divided among the winners. Under that system, there is no bookmaker setting odds and no book to balance. Only the crowd betting against the crowd. Much of the world, including most of American horse racing, eventually adopted the pool. But Britain kept its bookmakers, kept the men with the chalk and the shaded odds, and so kept alive the exact figure this story is about, the one who does not merely skim the pool but privately owns the edge. And here is the hinge of the whole story, the moment the bookmaker turns from a trackside tradesman into an outlaw. In 1853, the British government passed the Betting Houses Act, which banned cash betting shops and off-course betting. But read the fine print, because this is where it gets ugly. If you were rich, you could still bet, on credit, by telephone, or by letter, from the comfort of your club. What the law actually banned was the way ordinary, working people bet, in cash, on the street. Overnight, the very same act was a respectable pastime for a gentleman and a crime for a laborer. The bookmaker did not vanish. He went underground. And once you push a profitable, wildly popular trade into the shadows and stamp it a crime, you hand it, sooner or later, to organized crime. Nowhere did that happen more completely than in the United States. To take bets on horse races, a bookmaker needed one thing above all others: fast results, the outcome of a race hundreds of miles away, before the customer standing in front of him could possibly learn it another way. That single need created the Racewire, a private telegraph network that carried results to bookmakers across the country, and whoever controlled the wire controlled bookmaking itself. Through the early 20th century, that wire became one of the most valuable properties in American crime, fought over by men like Moses Annenberg and later seized by the Chicago syndicate that grew out of Al Capone's outfit. The quiet operator taking bets in a billiard hall, men in the mold of Arnold Rothstein, sat at the center of a web that ran into fixed games, loan sharking, and murder. The chalkboard on the heath had become the beating heart of a criminal empire, exactly as the name of this story promises. Consider the man who became the very symbol of it, Arnold Rothstein. In 1919, the story goes, Rothstein financed the fixing of baseball's World Series, paying members of the Chicago White Sox to lose on purpose so that his side of the book was guaranteed. Whether he pulled every string himself or simply knew it was coming and bet accordingly is still argued by historians, and the truth is almost certainly messier than the legend. But the lesson the underworld drew from it was crystal clear. The surest way to beat a game of chance is to remove the chance, and a man who already controls the odds is halfway there. Bookmaking, driven into the dark by the law, had become a school for precisely that kind of thinking. When the bookmakers finally stepped back into the light, they did it in the desert. In the 1940s, gangsters like Benjamin Siegel, the man the newspapers called Bugsy, helped turn a dusty Nevada town into Las Vegas, where betting was legal and the old illegal edge could run out in the open with a neon sign glowing above it. The Racewire followed the money there too, and for a while control of it was worth killing for. The line that began with Harry Ogden's chalkboard now ran straight through the mob, the desert, and the casino floor. So why did people keep betting with him, criminal or not? Because the bookmaker sold something far larger than a wager. On the illegal streets of industrial Britain, the local bookie was often the most reliable banker a poor neighborhood had. He extended informal credit, he paid out in cash and on time, and his entire business rested on a reputation for settling honestly, because a bookmaker who did not pay had no customers and, quite often, no protection. People trusted him precisely because he had to be trusted to survive. And he sold, above everything else, a story, those few golden minutes between placing the bet and hearing the result, when a docker or a miner could genuinely believe his whole life was about to change. That feeling, not the horse, was always the real product. So what does this job look like today? And where does the money actually sit? Here are the numbers. In 1961, Britain finally gave up the fight and legalized betting shops, and they spread across the country within months. In the United States, the turn came much later. For decades, a federal law kept sports betting penned almost entirely inside Nevada, until the Supreme Court struck that law down in 2018 and opened the door state by state. What followed was an explosion. Legal sports betting in America now takes in well over $100 billion in wagers a year, and the global gambling industry is worth hundreds of billions more on top of that. The chalk and the glove signals are gone, replaced by apps and algorithms, but the machine underneath is precisely the one Harry Ogden built. Here is the worked example that makes it concrete. Flip a fair coin, and a genuinely fair bet would pay you even money, $1 won for every dollar risked. A modern bookmaker offering odds on that same coin will pay you a little less than even money on each side. And that small shortfall, repeated across millions upon millions of bets, is the overround. On a single flip, you would never notice it. Across a nation of gamblers, it builds skyscrapers. And notice what the app changed and what it did not. The old bookmaker had to close his book the moment the race began, because once the horses were running, the result was rushing towards something fixed. The modern one never has to close at all. On your phone, the odds now shift second by second while the game is still being played. A fresh market on the next point, the next corner, the next ball, each one carrying the very same hidden margin as the last. The book that Harry Ogden balanced once a race is now balanced 1,000 times an hour, in your hand, in your pocket, at 3 in the morning. The edge did not grow. The chances to take it simply became endless. So go back one last time to the heath at Newmarket, to Harry Ogden with his chalk and his little book, smiling as the punters crowd in around his numbers. Every one of them believed they were matching wits with him, betting against the man with the board. They were not. They were feeding a machine that had already decided it would win, slowly, on average, no matter which horse came home. The bookmaker was never really gambling. The race was never the point. The margin is the product. That's not an accident. That's the business model. Everything that came after, the chalk, the tic-tac men, the wire, the crime, the glowing app in your hand, is just that one idea, dressed up for a new age. So the next time an advert tells you the odds are in your favor, remember what the odds actually are. They are not a prediction. They are a price, set by the house, with the house's margin folded invisibly inside. You are not really betting against another punter across the room. You are betting against a book that was balanced to beat you before you ever walked in. Enjoy the story if you love it, just always know who is selling it. If this video changed how you look at the betting shop on your high street, subscribe, because next we're covering more everyday jobs whose real history nobody tells you.